this morning, in just a few, we're going to spend a little bit of time in 2 Kings chapter 12. This is the story of Joash, who is the king of Judah. Joash became king under very unusual circumstances. And he was only 7 years old when he actually took the throne, but he had been hidden for quite a while before that point. And when he became king, his grandmother actually had to be killed because she was going to have him wiped out and his whole family, really. And so he becomes king when he's 7 years old, and he is instructed by Jehoiada, who is the high priest. And Joash, it says, did what pleased God as long as he lived. Now here is really the most famous story about Joash and what he's known for. He tells the priests any of the offerings that are coming in, free will or mandatory, we need to repair the temple. It looks terrible. It looks sorry. It's in bad condition. Please get it repaired. And some years later, and in fact it says it comes to the 21st year of his reign, and nothing has happened yet. They haven't done any of the repairs that they said they were supposed to do. And so he takes the responsibility away from the priests, doesn't allow them to handle any of the finances of this project anymore, takes the money away, and it's handled now in the palace by the king's secretary, by Jehoiada, the priest. And so from that point on, they actually put a wooden chest out in front of the temple, and people deposit their offerings right there. When it fills up, it's turned over, it's counted, and payments go directly to those who are working on repairing the temple, and it eventually comes into much better repair. That's the most famous story about Joash. And it's a really interesting story. When I was a kid, I remember a lot of times projects that our church would do or things that were being fundraised for, we'd actually kind of take off of this story a little bit, and we'd put a chest somewhere and put a hole in it. And I remember the Bible story even, clink, clink, the coins going in, or clunk if it was a bigger offering. And that was always kind of fun as a kid. But what I'm learning from this, I just took a few notes here, is that they had an expectation to not let God's house go into such disrepair. And it had happened. But the people's confidence in the temple system, think of how devastating some of this would have been. Because they have been giving to repairing the temple, and none of the funds are being used for that purpose. In context, it sounds like the priests may have been using the funds to buy extra liturgical things for the use in their services, so what they were doing would look better. The problem is, so much of what they did is happening behind closed doors. So people can't really see what they're doing with the funds. And the expectation is that the temple would be repaired, but it's not being repaired. What's happening here? Where are our offerings going? Imagine the consequences of people's perceptions on the whole temple system that was intended to teach the people about God's salvation. And now these kinds of things are happening. Other things have happened over the centuries that have shaken their confidence as well. They need to reestablish faith in what God had shown them to do so many centuries before out in the wilderness with Moses in the sanctuary. And it's shaky right now. And now these people are adding to that shakiness by not appropriately using the funds that were given for a specific purpose. So the responsibility has to be taken away, and now the offerings are very visibly given, not to the priest, but it's dropped into the chest. People can see that happening. They can see that it's not being taken into the temple. It's being taken to the king. And all of a sudden, the temple starts to be repaired, and their confidence could be restored. It teaches me just a few things. First of all, I have to realize my life is God's house. My whole person is God's house. Temple system as it was in the Old Testament doesn't really exist anymore. But my life does. And we're told that we are temples for the Holy Spirit. And so I need to keep my life in good repair, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. My expectation is that I'll use God's resources to keep my whole person, my life, in good repair, because this is the temple of God now. And it means I cannot be misappropriating the resources that God has given me to use. So, what has He given me? He's given me His Word. His Word helps me to grow spiritually. It teaches me the right paths to take. It is a lamp for my feet and a light for my path. What else has He given me? Well, He's given me time. I have 24 hours a day. I have 7 days a week. I have all of this time on my hands. How am I going to use it for the benefit of this whole person, God's temple? How am I going to use it for the benefit of the kingdom? He has given me opportunities for mental stimulation, reading, writing. Any of us who stop learning at some point in our life, that's the moment I believe we start to die, actually. So He's given us opportunities for mental stimulation. He gives me joy. He's given me good food. He's given me exercise. He's given me all kinds of resources to use to benefit His house, my life. And so what does this also teach me? Live above board. All of these resources being brought to the temple were taken for a while behind the closed doors, and people couldn't see what was happening with them. I imagine trust only was restored when they could see it was being used appropriately. So what does that say about me? This house, my life, live above board, live out in the open. Don't live behind closed doors all the time. Obviously, there's opportunities for privacy, and that's needed. You don't do everything you do out in the open. But at the same time, realize that a life lived out in the open is a life that is a lot more trustworthy, a lot more above board, living behind closed doors, always being in the shadows, if you will. It leads to suspicion. So live above board, live out in the open, and live for God no matter what. Hope this was a blessing to you. Hope you learned from it. And I hope that you live a life where people can see that God's house, your life, is in good repair and being used for the kingdom. God bless.